The courtroom was silent. Cameras flashed, reporters scribbled furiously, and the billionaire at the center of the scandal sat stone-faced at the defense table. His empire, built on power, money, and influence, was now collapsing in front of the entire nation. When the judge asked for the defense attorney to step forward, everyone turned. But to the shock of the entire room, the billionaire's lawyer stood up, whispered something coldly in his client's ear, and walked out. The billionaire called after him, but the lawyer didn't even glance back. The man who had always been untouchable suddenly looked small, abandoned, exposed, and vulnerable. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. The prosecutor smirked. The camera zoomed in on the billionaire's pale face. Then, from the back of the courtroom, a voice rang out, deep and steady. "I will defend you." All eyes snapped to the source of the voice. It wasn't a lawyer. It wasn't a judge. It wasn't anyone the media recognized. It was the janitor, the quiet man in a simple uniform who had mopped the marble floors of the courthouse every day for years. And now, he was stepping forward, staring directly at the billionaire with a look of fearless determination. The entire courtroom froze. The courtroom erupted into whispers. Reporters craned their necks, the prosecutor frowned, and the judge slammed his gavel to restore order. "Silence in my courtroom," the judge barked. But even he couldn't hide his curiosity. A janitor had just declared he would defend one of the richest men in the country. The billionaire turned, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You?" he whispered. "You can't be serious." The janitor didn't flinch. "I may not wear a suit," he said firmly, "but I know the truth. And I've seen enough to stand where your lawyer refused to." The billionaire blinked, stunned. For the first time in his life, someone was speaking to him without fear of his money or influence. The prosecutor chuckled mockingly. "This is ridiculous. A janitor? Representing in a court of law? Is this some kind of joke?" But the janitor stood taller. "What's ridiculous," he replied, his voice echoing through the chamber, "is a system that allows greed to silence justice. If no one else will defend him fairly, I will." The judge leaned forward, studying the man carefully. The room held its breath. Was this even possible? Could the janitor really step into a battle meant for lawyers and power brokers? The answer was written in the fire in his eyes. He wasn't backing down. The judge adjusted his glasses, his expression caught between disbelief and intrigue. "Sir, are you even qualified to speak in this court?" he asked cautiously. The janitor stepped forward, his steady footsteps echoing against the marble floor. "I may not have a law degree, Your Honor," he said, "but I have studied every trial that has passed through this courtroom for the past 10 years. Every night, after mopping these floors, I sat in the gallery and listened. I learned the tactics, the arguments, the tricks, and the truths that too many lawyers ignored." The courtroom murmured again, this time not with ridicule, but with awe. Some reporters scribbled furiously, sensing that this moment was history in the making. The billionaire's jaw tightened. "Why?" he demanded, his voice low but urgent. "Why would you risk everything for me?" The janitor's eyes didn't waver. "Because when the world turns its back on you, sometimes the only one left is the person you never noticed. And I won't let justice be decided by abandonment or arrogance." The prosecutor sneered, rolling his eyes. "Justice?" he scoffed. "This man is no lawyer. This is a circus." But the judge didn't dismiss him. Instead, he leaned forward with a strange curiosity in his voice. "Very well," he said slowly. "If you truly believe you can speak for the defense, I will allow you to begin." Gasps filled the courtroom. The janitor, standing in his worn uniform, had just been given the floor. The billionaire stared at him, speechless. And the janitor turned toward the jury, ready to speak his first words of defense. The janitor placed both hands on the defense table, his eyes locked on the jury. The fluorescent lights above seemed harsher now, every gaze fixed on him. He took a breath. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, he began, his voice steady, you've been told this man is guilty. You've seen headlines, you've heard rumors, and you've watched as his own lawyer abandoned him. But what you haven't seen, what no one has shown you, is the whole truth. The prosecutor smirked, crossing his arms, but the jurors leaned in. The janitor continued, his words slow but sharp. I clean this courthouse every night. I sweep away the dust that others leave behind. And in those long hours, I've seen more than anyone realizes. I've overheard conversations. I've watched evidence being mishandled. I've noticed documents disappear. A hush fell over the courtroom. Reporters froze, pens hovering midair. Even the judge sat straighter in his chair. The billionaire turned his head sharply toward him. What are you saying? He whispered. The janitor didn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the jury. I'm saying that what you've been shown isn't the full picture. That the truth was buried, not by accident, but because someone wanted him convicted before this trial even began. The prosecutor slammed his hand on the table. Objection. This is outrageous. He's making baseless claims. But the judge raised a hand. Overruled, for now, he said cautiously. I want to hear where this goes. And in that moment, the janitor knew, he had the room's attention. The janitor stepped closer to the jury box, his eyes unwavering. You see, he said firmly, justice isn't just about laws written in books. It's about fairness. And fairness demands that every piece of evidence, every detail, is seen, not hidden. The jury members shifted, some exchanging uncertain glances. The prosecutor's confidence cracked as he scribbled furious notes. The janitor then reached into his worn bag and pulled out a stack of papers, edges frayed but neatly organized. He set them on the table with a quiet thud that echoed louder than any gavel. These, he declared, are copies of documents I found discarded in trash bins right here in this courthouse. Evidence that was never presented. Evidence that could change everything. The courtroom gasped. Reporters leapt to their feet, snapping photos. The billionaire's eyes widened, his disbelief turning into a spark of hope. The judge leaned forward. Explain yourself, he demanded. The janitor nodded. Every night, I watched. I noticed when files were missing from folders. I noticed when certain documents mysteriously ended up in shredding piles. But I'm a janitor, I don't have the power to question it. Still, I kept copies. I kept proof. And today, I bring them forward. The prosecutor shot up. This is absurd. He's tampered with evidence. He's nothing more than. But the judge slammed his gavel. Sit down. The entire courtroom had shifted. The janitor was no longer just a man in uniform. He was the one holding the key to the truth. And everyone knew it. The judge gestured to the bailiff, who quickly took the stack of papers from the janitor and delivered them to the bench. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the judge flipped through the pages, his brows furrowing deeper with each turn. The prosecutor looked nervous now, his jaw tightening. He whispered something to his assistant, who hurriedly opened a briefcase. Finally, the judge set the papers down. His voice was sharp. These are case files. Witness statements. Financial records, all of which should have been submitted to this court. He paused, glaring over his glasses at the prosecutor. Why were these not in evidence? The prosecutor stammered, his confidence evaporating. Your Honor, I cannot confirm the origin of those documents. They could be fabricated. Fabricated? The janitor cut in, his voice booming. I pulled those out of your office trash myself. Don't stand here and pretend you don't know what they are. Gasps filled the room. The billionaire leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table, his face flushed with a strange mix of fear and hope. The judge's gavel cracked against the wood. Order. Order in the court. But the order was gone, the courtroom had erupted into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed wildly, and jurors sat stunned, staring at the janitor as though he had just upended the entire trial. And in that chaos, one truth became clear: the janitor wasn't just defending the billionaire. He was exposing a cover-up that reached far deeper than anyone expected. The prosecutor's face turned red as he slammed his fist on the table. This is a stunt. He's trying to derail the trial with theatrics. But the judge wasn't convinced. He tapped the stack of hidden documents with a firm hand. If these papers are authentic, then this trial has been compromised. And I will not ignore that. The jury sat in stunned silence, their eyes bouncing between the janitor and the prosecutor. The power in the room had shifted completely. The janitor took a slow step forward, his voice calm but cutting. You called me a janitor, as if that makes me less. But maybe it's because I'm just a janitor that I could see what others ignored. I wasn't blinded by wealth or power. I was here, quietly watching. And I saw the truth. The billionaire, who had always carried himself with arrogance, now looked at the janitor with something he had never shown another person before: gratitude. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You're saving me." The janitor didn't turn to him. His eyes stayed fixed on the jury. "I'm not saving you," he said firmly. "I'm saving justice. Because if the truth can be thrown in the trash, then none of us are safe." For a moment, the entire courtroom fell into absolute silence. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing this story would dominate every headline in the nation. The judge finally spoke. "This trial has taken an unexpected turn. Court will recess until we can verify this evidence." The gavel came down hard, but no one moved. All eyes were still locked on the janitor. He had just shaken the foundations of the entire case. The courtroom emptied into chaos as the recess was called. Reporters swarmed the halls, cameras flashing, microphones shoved into anyone's face who would speak. But inside the defense chamber, the billionaire sat slumped in his chair, staring at the janitor with disbelief. "Why," he finally muttered. "You could have walked away. You owe me nothing." The janitor slowly sat down across from him. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't owe you. But I owe the truth. And I couldn't stand by while justice was thrown away because of power and corruption." The billionaire leaned forward, his voice trembling. "You don't understand. If those documents are real, then this isn't just about me. There are people, powerful people, who will do anything to bury this." The janitor's jaw tightened. "Then let them try. I've been invisible my whole life. No one noticed me pushing a mop down these halls. But now they'll have to notice. And I won't be silenced." The billionaire's eyes softened. He had always believed loyalty could be bought with money. But this man wasn't here for money, he was here for justice. Outside, chants from the crowd grew louder as word of the janitor's actions spread. People held up signs, some cheering, some demanding answers. For the first time in years, the billionaire realized he wasn't in control. The janitor was. And the entire nation was watching. By the time court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery was packed, journalists, activists, and curious citizens filling every seat. The story of the janitor who stood up in court had already gone viral, and now the world was watching. The judge returned, carrying a folder. His expression was grave. "The documents provided by the defense," he announced, "have been authenticated. They are legitimate court records that were, in fact, omitted from evidence." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor froze, his mouth open but no words coming out. The janitor didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, his hands folded calmly in front of him. "Thank you, Your Honor," he said softly. The judge turned his glare toward the prosecution. "I want a full explanation as to how this evidence was deliberately discarded." The prosecutor's voice cracked. I can't speak to that, Your Honor." "Then perhaps," the judge snapped, "you will answer to the Bar Association when this trial is over." The jury leaned forward, their perception of the case completely shattered. What had once seemed like an airtight prosecution now looked rotten. The billionaire stared at the janitor in awe. For years, his wealth had shielded him from consequences, but now, it wasn't his money saving him. It was the courage of a man society had overlooked. The janitor rose, his voice ringing out with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, I told you before, I am not here to excuse wrongdoing. If he is guilty, let him face it. But guilt cannot be decided by lies, cover-ups, and missing truths. Not in this courtroom. Not in this country." The silence that followed was deafening. And in that silence, everyone understood, the janitor had just changed the course of the trial. The prosecutor's hands trembled as he shuffled his notes, but it was useless, the foundation of his case had crumbled. The jury no longer looked at him with trust. Their eyes were fixed on the janitor, the unlikely defender who had turned the trial upside down. The judge leaned back in his chair. "We will proceed," he said firmly. "But know this, the defense has uncovered a serious breach of justice. The jury must weigh everything they've heard today with the knowledge that evidence was deliberately hidden." The prosecutor tried to recover. He stood and barked at the jury, "Don't let theatrics fool you. This man is not a lawyer. He's a janitor. He has no right to sway your judgment." The janitor rose slowly, meeting the prosecutor's fury with calm resolve. "You're right about one thing," he said. "I am a janitor. I clean up what others leave behind. And that's exactly what I've done here, cleaned up the lies, the corruption, and the deception you tried to sweep under the rug." The gallery erupted in cheers before the judge's gavel slammed down. "Order," he demanded, though even he couldn't hide the faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The billionaire sat frozen, overwhelmed by the spectacle. For years, he had thought himself untouchable because of money. Now, sitting beside the janitor, he realized true power didn't come from wealth, it came from courage. The janitor turned back to the jury, his voice steady but fierce. "I don't ask you to see him as innocent. I only ask you to see the truth. And the truth is this, if the system can be manipulated against one man, it can be manipulated against anyone. Today it's him. Tomorrow, it could be you." A hush fell over the courtroom. Even the prosecutor had no rebuttal. And in that silence, the janitor's words hit harder than any lawyer's closing argument ever could. The jury's faces told the story, confusion, doubt, but also awakening. They whispered to each other, some nodding, some staring at the stack of hidden documents as though it carried the weight of the entire case. The billionaire leaned toward the janitor, whispering, "Even if I walk free, they'll come after you. You've embarrassed too many powerful people." The janitor's expression didn't change. "Then let them come," he replied. "I've spent my life in the shadows. Maybe it's time someone like me stood in the light." The prosecutor tried one last desperate move. "Your Honor, this cannot continue. The defense is being led by an unlicensed civilian. This is illegal." But the judge cut him off sharply. "And yet it was this civilian who uncovered evidence you failed to provide. Sit down before I hold you in contempt." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Reporters scribbled wildly, knowing tomorrow's headlines would not just be about the billionaire, it would be about the janitor who defied the system. The janitor turned to the jury again. His voice dropped lower, more personal. "I know what it's like to be overlooked. To be told your voice doesn't matter. But every voice matters. Even mine. Even yours. Don't let power decide this case, let the truth decide it." The words struck deep. Several jurors swallowed hard, their eyes misting. The billionaire sat back, for once humbled into silence. He wasn't the star of this trial anymore. The janitor was. And the world outside was waiting to see what would happen next. The judge looked over the courtroom, then turned his gaze to the jury. You have heard testimony. You have seen evidence. And you have witnessed the uncovering of documents that should never have been hidden. The responsibility now lies with you. The jury filed out, leaving the room tense and silent. Minutes felt like hours as the world waited for the decision. The billionaire sat with his head in his hands, his confidence gone. The janitor stood still, calm as ever, though his heart pounded in his chest. Finally, the jury returned. The foreman rose, holding the verdict slip. The judge's voice rang out, "Have you reached a verdict?" "Yes, Your Honor," the foreman said. The paper was handed to the judge, who scanned it with a solemn face before nodding. On the charge of fraud and conspiracy, he paused, the silence deafening. We find the defendant, not guilty, The courtroom exploded. Reporters shouted into cameras, people gasped, and the billionaire nearly collapsed in his chair with relief. But it wasn't the billionaire who the crowd surged toward. It was the janitor. He stood tall as microphones and cameras swarmed him, his name already echo. Through the halls. The man who had always been invisible was now the voice of justice. The billionaire reached out, gripping his arm. "I'll never forget this," he said hoarsely. "You saved me when no one else would." The janitor shook his head. "I didn't save you," he replied firmly. "I saved the truth. Remember that." The cameras captured every word. And in that moment, the janitor became more than a man with a mop, he became a symbol. A reminder that sometimes, the least expected person can change everything. Months later, the courthouse stood quiet again, its marble halls polished just as before. The trial that had once captured the nation's attention was now history, but its impact lingered. The billionaire rebuilt his public image, though humbled. He no longer walked past the janitor without notice. Each time their paths crossed, he offered a respectful nod, a silent acknowledgement that money hadn't saved him, truth had. The prosecutor, disgraced and disbarred, became a cautionary tale of greed and corruption. His downfall was a reminder that justice, though delayed, could never be silenced forever. And the janitor? He never stopped cleaning the halls of the courthouse. But he was no longer just the man in the background. People stopped to shake his hand, jurors thanked him quietly, and even judges greeted him with respect. He didn't seek fame. He didn't need riches. What he carried instead was something greater, the knowledge that one voice, his voice, had changed the course of justice when no one else dared to. At night, as he pushed his mop across the empty courtroom floor, he would glance at the judge's bench, remembering the day he stood where no one thought he belonged. A small smile would tug at his lips, because he knew the truth he had spoken still echoed there. And in the silence of the empty chamber, those words remained eternal. "I will defend you."